The year is 2009. Just graduated from high school, it's September now and me and my 3 best friends were all accepted into the same school. School year starts on the 18th, so we decide to go on a week-long road trip from the 5th to the 12th from our shitty little town in Oregon to San Francisco and back. Friends are Eddie, Trevor, and Marco. Everything's going fine on the first day, moods are high, Eddie's high, we're all having fun. What could possibly go wrong? Well, Anons reading this, here's what went wrong, everything. Dramatic as that is, it's true. It started on day 2 when we were a little over halfway to San Francisco. We stopped through a small town called Eureka to have lunch. After that we continued driving, and Trevor noticed Marco was looking a little ill. He said it was fine though, so we continued our drive. The trip was supposed to be a 13-hour drive spread over 2 days, but we never made it to San Francisco. I started to get an unsettling feeling in my stomach when the sun was starting to set and we still weren't in San Francisco. In fact, we weren't even close. We did stop earlier in the day to take a few photos of the ocean, but it didn't take that long. Eddie was the one in control of the wheel now and heaved a heavy sigh of relief when a sign finally read entering Santa Rosa. Great, we were almost there. Another 4 hours passed and we still weren't in San Francisco. We were on the correct highway, going in the correct direction, but we weren't getting anywhere. What's more, looking back on it, I hadn't seen a single car on the highway after 7 p.m. Not a single one. We'd seen them in the towns, but not with us. It was 1 a.m. when we officially were freaking out. We stopped at this little hotel to stay in and asked where we were. This is Lakeport. Lakeport? Before we could start yelling at Eddie for fucking up, Trevor was suddenly met with the weight of Marco collapsing on him, which wasn't much, considering Marco was a 5 feet 6 inches 102 pounds semi-anorexic guy. We contemplated calling 911 but he muttered "I'm fine, just sleepy," and then thoroughly passed out. It was about 3 a.m. when I heard absolutely awful noises coming from our room's bathroom. Like a cat being strangled. I remembered Marco looking ill and assumed he was just puking from food poisoning, but being the person I am I had to go give him comfort. I opened the door, and nothing. Marco wasn't there, the light was on, but all there was blood. Why was there blood on the floor? Was Marco alright? Am I hallucinating? Well, turns out, I wasn't, but I made the grave mistake of assuming I was and going back to sleep. Was awakened by Eddie 3 hours later, asking why there was blood on the bathroom floor and where the hell Marco was. We all got up and asked the receptionist if he'd seen him, but to no avail. Panic was rising as fast as Eddie's blood pressure was. We called the cops and they said they'd send someone over, but no one ever came. We called again an hour later, and nothing. So, we went back to sleep. Marco was there in the morning, looking like shit, but he was alive and that's what mattered. But something was off. He was crying into Trevor's shoulder, talking about the Onga that tried to rape and murder him. He claimed he was taken suddenly after getting up to go to the bathroom. One could have easily assumed he was just on drugs, but Marco was straight edge to the T. He was a pranker though, but even more than that, he wasn't lying. We could tell by the fear in his eyes. It may sound kind of gay, but when he clung tightly to Trevor all that day, physically holding his hand while looking like an abandoned kitten, we knew something had happened. After double checking that yes, we were going in the right direction, we set off for San Francisco and told Marco to forget his worries. He couldn't. He kept his eyes closed the entire time because he was terrified of looking at the forest. An hour in and he suddenly opened the car door while the car was in motion to puke out black and red bile. And it was a lot. More than what I thought could fit in that tiny body of his. An hour after that, we read a sign that said Saratoga Springs. Eddie sighed and handed the wheel over to me. We turned the car around. Another hour and the sign read Upper Lake. We were getting increasingly frustrated. Marco was shivering violently in the back seat with his head rested on Trevor's lap. Every 10 minutes or so he would vomit into one of the many plastic bags kept there. Another hour, another headache. Saratoga Springs was the sign, and so this time we decided to not turn around. Another hour, Upper Lake. No matter what direction we drove in, we were stuck between these two towns. And going by the Google Maps calculations of today, this shouldn't have taken us an hour to drive that road. For reference, it should have taken us 6 minutes. 6 minutes. Marco was looking increasingly worse as we drove, and it all came crashing down when he suddenly demanded I pull over, and so I did. Marco threw himself at the ground and vomited up what seemed to be an endless stream of blood. Then came pieces of meat. Flesh. And then came nothing. We called 911. Nobody came. We called over and over. Someone finally picked up. Nobody came. Marco began bleeding from his fingernails, eyeballs, nose, ears, and belly button. He was unresponsive, so Trevor tried CPR. It didn't work. The smell was rancid. Nobody came. No cars were around. Marco died that day. We watched in tears as the last breath exited his lungs. We piled him into the car and drove to Upper Lake. An autopsy was performed and we told his parents. We went back home the next day, all convinced the road would lead us to Saratoga Springs. It didn't. There were cars on the road. We were making proper time. We arrived home. 4 years later and his grave was dug up by an unidentified person/animal. His skull was found on the grounds of Upper Lake Elementary School, but the rest of his body wasn't. A triangle had been carved into it. I had to go to San Francisco this year for a job opportunity. Trevor and Eddie went with me. We never stopped in that diner, never looked back, never looked at the street signs. We got there when we prayed we would. I don't remember Eddie having heterochromia. I don't recall Trevor's voice sounding that way. All I know is that when I saw fresh blood of a dead doe on the side of the road, I screamed for an hour straight.